Hello and welcome to the TCS Podcast, where we're dedicated to helping you achieve extraordinary growth and success by supplying you with the tools, resources, and support necessary to not only build profitable businesses, but to create a lasting impact on your families, companies, and communities. Eric Guy here, president of TCS. We're here today, a little bit different turn, but a turn well worth it because what's going on here is our guest, Ron Beckner. I'm going to let him introduce himself a little bit, but we're going to talk about finances today with Ron. I mean, that's a big topic with, as all of you know that are in the Contractor School. It's always been a big topic. We have several folks that have weighed in on this, and I don't think we could ever get enough of information about this. So, Ron, welcome to the podcast. Appreciate it, you coming on.
Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate you having me. You're bringing something up that I think is huge. And us working class Americans really do get what I call a very deficient education when it comes to money matters. And one thing that I've learned, being a third-generation pipefitter welder, as well as retired military, is, man, they teach us how to do a job efficiently. They teach us how to do it safely. We understand time and materials, but what they don't teach us is how to take that money that we can earn on these jobs and these projects and put it to work and have it working just as hard for us as we've had to work for it. So that's why I went ahead, and I've been in this financial services business going in my 12th year. But I did 4 active Navy, I did 4 active Coast Guard, I did 16 Naval Reserve, and while I was in the Naval Reserves, I was also going through an apprenticeship for the pipe fitters. Then I did everything from project superintendent right on down, Eric. So I understand the working class American's dilemma when it comes to money matters, because nobody ever taught me the stuff that I'm now teaching. So I did write a book called A Blueprint and Financial Guide for the Working Class American. It's available on Amazon. It's also available on Audible, a very easy read. It reads just like I talk. I don't talk over anybody's head. I want to make it as simple as I possibly can because I'm a simple guy, and I had to explain it like I could understand it. And, I just love what I'm doing, and thank you again for having me, man. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, and it's been a big topic. You probably don't know this, Ron, but we, as part in our community, we have over the past year, we've added someone that's been a huge part of our community, Lauren, who is fantastic with finances, have been helping a lot of our contractors. So this is just going to continue to add to that conversation, and that's kind of how I wanted to tee this up today. So. You've seen a lot of contractors because you've come from that background, succeed and struggle. Why do you think finances seem to trip up so many?
I really do. It goes back to what we were talking about, Eric. It's the lack of understanding that money's just a tool, and I think one of the biggest myths out there is it takes money to make money. Well, I don't truly believe that. What I believe is there's a cost and value to everything. And that's really what I think a good contractor is looking for. They've got a value that they can provide, and what they have to do is find that cost equivalency or the value that's greater than the cost, and what are they able and willing to do. So understand how money can be working as a tool for you, and understanding the different ways that you can either leverage it, you can either, start small and build. And I know we're going to talk about how do we create these different buckets as this talk goes on. But, I think that's the biggest thing, is trying to get your head around using money as a tool and understanding how to leverage it and do some different things. And that's something that I love doing.
Yeah. So you talk about, the biggest financial mistakes. Do you want to, I would like to kind of run through those and just keep it simple, like you said, for our audience. Confusing cash with profit.
Yeah. So let's talk about the basics of the game, because everybody here in America, we're forced to play a game, Eric, right? And I tell people, if you don't know the rules of the game, you're never going to win. So I start with the basics. There's 4 tax quadrants that we have to think about, and there's 3 buckets of money. So we have to understand that we as employees and small business owners, we're going to pay the highest taxes. Now, I don't give tax advice, but I got to know this stuff. And understanding that we're going to pay the highest taxes in that realm is something that's going to be key to talking about what you just brought up. The big business, if you've got 500 employees or more, you get a little bit of a tax break because you're providing a lot more labor and paying more wages and helping people be more contributory to the system than somebody that's a smaller business. But the investor actually pays the least tax. And this is something that a lot of us don't understand. And the reason I can say that is if you look at what they tax us on our tax rates for our income, and even if it's the highest bracket, which is 37%, the most they'll ever tax us on our capital gains or our long-term dividends is going to be 20%. That's a 17% jump. And that's a savings to us, and we got to understand that. The 3 buckets of money are the taxable, the tax deferred, and the tax-free. And I love tax-free, and I don't care if you're a contractor, I don't care if you're an individual. I want you to get your head around it because we got to really see what's going on in the big picture. So these are just the basic rules of the game to understand, and then we can start moving forward from there.
Good stuff. What about the next one, not budgeting for growth? I mean, this has been huge. I mean, this is always been a topic of conversation for our contractors because there's some fear there. So a lot of contractors set goals but don't build the budget to support them.
You know, so when you get to thinking about that, right? And a lot of us, and I say us because we get pretty excited when we get a good job and we're making some good money, but then we start kind of doubting ourselves for that next one. Can we do it, right? I think it starts getting into a mental capability, but this is understanding those 3 buckets of money again. And if we got a tax-free bucket that we can use as a resource and leverage, and we know that we've got those reserves, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about that too, I want that resource available, but we have to, again, understand how we can tap into that to make sure that we can go ahead and not be running over our feet, basically, because if we're moving too fast, we're going to fall on our face. So I think the biggest thing is, again, taking things step by step, understanding that cost and that value that we're providing. And if we can provide that greater value, word's going to get out and people are going to want to work with you because your cost is what I call efficient. They see a value because it's equal or greater to the cost that you're asking for the services you're providing.
Yeah. Why would you say that budgeting equals freedom and not restriction? Like I hear that a lot. Like I feel restricted if I go do that. Why would you argue that it's more freedom than anything else?
Yep. So we can think about, and I give out what I call budget worksheets to all of my clients because I really want them to understand what's going in and what's going out. I've got a financial star process that I work with everybody that I'm dealing with, and I want them to understand the income. I want them to understand their spending. I want them to understand the taxes. So budgeting is huge here, Eric. Think about, and this is why Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman, these people make their living on people that are making $60,000 and spending $80,000 because they can't budget, right? And then what they have to do is they have to teach them from the ground up, and they do their little snowball effect, and they, go after the higher interest rates and do after this stuff to try and get it. But you got to build that budget to do it. If you can be ahead of that curve, understanding the 4 tax quadrants, the 3 buckets of money, and have an actual budget that you live by. Don't think of it as a restriction because it's not. What it's going to do is it's going to free you up to be able to put money into these areas where you can leverage, where you can actually benefit from that. And no, it doesn't happen overnight, bro, right? Nothing happens overnight. But it's a piece by piece, step by step, brick by brick, fit by fit. You can make this happen. And I always tell people, I looked at the apprenticeship program I had to go through, and it was a 5-year process. And if you think about it, I was a big Denver Broncos fan, still kind of am. But what I saw, when I saw a commercial where you had Peyton Manning say, hey, it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert in your field. And you think about an apprenticeship program, if you're doing 2,000 hours a year, right, of work, it takes you 5 years to become that journeyman, to become that expert. And that's exactly how I look at this, man. You just have to put yourself through the process, and the budget is huge in that process.
Well, let's move to another area of contention especially for our contractors, but this is for everybody, that does similar work. Poor job costing and tracking. You can't manage what you don't measure. Why do so many contractors fall short here? I mean, what do you have even your own experience example for this?
Yeah, one of the biggest things, and you can, I know this is going to sound funny, but you can use weight loss as an example, right? If you're trying to lose 20 pounds and you're not budgeting what you're putting inside your body, and then you're not standing on that scale on a daily basis to measure or weigh where you are, it's the same thing in contracting, right? I mean, you've got this budget. You've got this box that you've got to make this work in. And unless something happens where you're working T&M, right? If you get time and material, hey man, the box is pretty wide open. But if you've done a hard bid and this is what they're going to hold your feet to the fire on, man, if you're not weighing and measuring and keeping track of that on a daily basis, bro, and I'm talking about, your material costs, I'm talking about your labor costs, I'm talking about all of your overhead, we've got fixed things that we can look, we know, hey, this is what my labor is going to cost, here's what the materials are going to cost, but there are variables that we have to be able to kind of account for as well. And we get that usually in the bid. We know where those are, and that's where we've got to have that money set aside. But if we have some money in certain areas that we can actually leverage, and a lot of people will use, if they've got a bank account where they give them a running credit, right? They can leverage that money, but don't overextend either, right? You can't take that for granted, if that makes any sense. But man, you got to just keep track of it daily. And I can remember being a superintendent, man. Sometimes I wouldn't sleep well at night because I'd be worried about, that cost and value. I knew the value was always there, but I kept thinking, man, are we gonna hit this? And what I always did, Eric, is I would include the team. So I remember one time, I'm just going to give an example here. We were working at Coors and we were doing a spent grain. We were getting ready for a shutdown. And I had a general contractor. He walked around and we sat in a meeting. He said, "Now you're never going to make this shutdown. You're not going to be ready for it." And I said, "Well, I'm going to disagree with you on that because I believe my people are capable of it." And he said, "No, I've been doing this 20 years. There's no way you guys are going to be ready in a week." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, you know what? Well, give me a week and let's talk in a week." And the first thing I did is I went and I told all my general foreman, you just stop all work and bring everybody together right now. And I basically told them, hey, here's the gist of the meeting. The general contractor says you guys can't do it. I'm not the guy out there doing the work. I walked around. I know you guys I know your skill, right? I know the value that you're bringing here, but you got to tell me right now. Tell me right now, are we going to make this shutdown? I've shared everything with you. And what I mean by that is my dad taught me that if you give people time, they can do anything in the world. But time's an acronym, Eric. It stands for tools, information, material, and equipment. If you're missing any one of those 4 elements, you're not going to be able to do the job. So I provided that time to everybody. And when I asked him, I said, listen, you guys have to tell me if we're going to make this shutdown. If we can't, tell me now. I'll go back to the guy and say, you know what, you're right. We need to reschedule this. We'll be proactive about it. But if you guys say we're going to get it done, man, we're going to hit it and we'll hit the ground running. What are we going to do? They're like, man, we're going to get it done, Ron. We're going to get it done. And by God, I sat in the meeting a week later and that guy's sitting there, he's shaking his head and he says, I would have never believed it had I not seen it with my own eyes. I said, well, are we ready? He said, you guys are ready. And what you did is that there's that value of that team. And that was tracking it, going exactly what you're saying. You got to pay attention to everything of what's going on because everybody's got an expectation. There are timelines in these certain situations, and a shutdown is huge, right? Especially when you shut down a beer plant and they're not making beer, they're not making money. So, we hit her, and I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and the next one that I wanted to jump into was underestimating overhead because it sneaks up on a lot of our contractors.
Yeah.
What do you think, or what's been your experience on what they typically overlook?
I think typically what gets overlooked is when you're on a project, you are usually there with other contractors and other trades. And, you take it for granted that you've got your poop in a group, as I like to say, right? We know what we've got to do, but all of a sudden you got a drywaller that's coming in. And if there's not that cooperation and collaboration with those other trades, if I'm trying to run pipe through a wall and all of a sudden I got, the drywaller coming in where there was no drywall and I can get that pipe through easily, or I've got an electrician all of a sudden running his conduit right where my pipe's going to be, and I got people, stacked on each other from different trades, we're going to run into problems. And I think those are costs and time that really can be avoided if we just get the people on the same play page and understanding the progression of the work. That's what I think, Eric. I think that's your biggest problems.
And then the last one, not building cash reserves. So too many owners just live job to job, right? Why is having those reserves a game changer? I know that sounds like a foolish question, but it's not because of what I just said. We just live job to job and then we don't build anything. Why is that a game changer for so many people?
So let's back up the bus just a little bit and let's talk about where these contractors come from, right? They were working class Americans, and that's what most of us do. We live paycheck to paycheck, right? And that's why we like getting paid weekly. Because man, if I don't get paid on that week, I'm not going to be able to make it. And what I am trying to get people's head around through my book is budgeting. And it's not just on a personal basis, it's also on that contractor basis. If you don't take, and I think you've got to understand your account payables too. And I think you need to be able to hold people's feet to the fire because that's your lifeblood, bro. And if we can't get those people to stand up to their part of the bargain, and this is getting into, initial contracting and deadlines and timelines, and everybody's got to meet those schedules, but that money is a tool that we can keep going on. But let's go back to the budgeting, right? If we can say, hey, listen, we're going to take 5% or 10% every time we get that paid, and that's going to be in a certain bucket that we're either going to be able to leverage or we know we're going to need that for costs going forward, whether it's going to be, hey, we ran into this situation on this project or we're getting ready for that project. And right now, this material, I can budget it, buying it with this project. I'll buy a little extra because I'm buying in bulk. Now I get a better deal on it and I've got the cash reserves over here. You're thinking ahead. And this is where I start working with people on a personal basis and even a business basis, where you can look at something, an insurance product, where you're building cash value and you can borrow out of it, but you're still getting growth on the full amount of money that's in there. And that's a leveraging thing that a lot of people don't understand. And that's a value that I feel I can bring to people once we sit down and start going and I'm educating you on stuff. Now you can make good educated decisions.
Before we get to the rapid fire questions here, Ron, what would you say separates the contractors who thrive financially from those that always are feeling broke?
I'm going to say it's the understanding of who they are, right? They've got to have that I call it a confidence, but they've got to understand who they are. And if they've got that level of confidence and understanding within themselves, as well as the people around them, I can go back to my example, right? I knew the guys working for me. And I knew that if I was under a tight schedule, I'm not the guy out there, dropping the hood and welding the pipe. I'm not the guy out there doing the fits. I'm the guy that's leading this team, and I gotta know. I gotta have that level of confidence inside me, knowing that these guys. But you know what I do is I share that, and you've got to have a level of confidence to be able to give up what you may think is your power and give that power to your people, because that's who's going to do the work. That's who's going to make you look good. And, I think the problem a lot of us have is we let what's between our ears get in the way, and we don't, we get overconfident, if you will, and we don't want to share that power. And I find that sharing the power really gives you even more power, right? And people recognize that. So, thinking about what we can personally do for ourselves, and this is getting into the simple things like a budget, right? If I'm following that budget, I'm empowering myself. And if I include my workers and say, look, share with them the tools, information, that's the budget worksheet, the material, equipment, share that time with them so they understand. They're not sitting there, you've given them a job to do, they've done it, and now they're sitting there waiting for you, and you're standing around, what the hell are you doing? Well, we're waiting for you. That you've got to give them as much as you possibly can, which empowers them. And you'll know who your leaders are, right? You'll know who your key people are. And those are the people that you want to empower even more. And that's who's going to help you make more of you. They're going to make you look good, bro.
All right, you ready for the rapid fire questions?
All right, let's see.
All right, here we go. All right, what's one financial tool or app you recommend to every contractor?
An Index Universal Life Policy.
Okay. If you had to choose, cut costs or raise prices?
I'm going to probably say, this gets to my cost and value again, and I'm probably going to have to say cut costs.
Okay. What's the number one financial metric contractors should check weekly?
I think they got to check their accounts payable weekly, man. They got to stay on that, and they got to make sure that these people are standing up to that contract.
What's the biggest financial myth you wish contractors would stop believing?
It takes money to make money. I truly believe, it's what they're going to be able to provide in value that's going to make their money.
And then last, if a contractor's broke today, what's the very first step they should take?
I think it's going to have to be, are they working on a budget? Are they truly understanding their value? And then the cost. Again, I'm really big on that value and cost. And I'm going to go back to the other rapid fire question when I said cut costs. If you're providing a really good value, we got to be careful on cutting the cost. I want to cut the cost in areas that it's going to make sense. But, right? And that's a two-pronged question when I'm going to go back to it. And then I'll drop back to the other one. But I want people to realize if you really are providing a really kick-ass value, don't cut your cost there. Cut your costs in an area where it's not going to hurt that value. And then coming back to understanding, what you're going to do weekly, it's understanding that value. And is that value still held to a high standard? Keep those accounts payable going. Make sure your quality is there. Quality. And man, I don't think you can miss.
Good stuff. How do our folks reach out to you if they're interested in talking to you? Where do we find you at?
So I can be found on peaks-integrity.com. And Peaks Integrity Wealth Management, that's my firm. And what I want people to understand is because I'm a working class American, and I did write a book called A Blueprint and Financial Guide for Working Class Americans. That's available on Amazon. And again, it's also on Audible. So if you like to listen in the windshield, that's where I get all my education. I call it my auto university. While I'm getting that windshield time in, I'm listening to books. It's 2 hours and 22 minutes. I got a really good guy out of Florida that reads it. The guy reads it really well. And, it's just paying attention, I think, that's going to help you. So again, peaks-integrity.com. My phone number is 719-581-7325. That's my office. You can talk to my assistant. I don't charge anything to sit and talk, you guys. Education is what I love providing. And what I really want people to understand, it's through that education that you get to make educated decisions. I'm not ever going to tell somebody, hey, let's sit down, talk about your money, give it to me and trust me. No. I'm going to go through my R-time formula, and this gets into tools, information, material, and equipment. The tools are the education that I have, but it also includes the education that you have. And I don't care what level it is. Well, I'm going to meet you there, and I'm going to help get you to that higher level that's going to help you understand the information that we're going to look at. And maybe you got some information on materials that we can use money, which is a material, to put it to work to the best of its ability. And the equipment is my computer, my television, my telephone. Hell, it's even my vehicle. If I got to come sit at your kitchen table or even, in your office, I will. Now, I added an R to time because that clock only goes one way, Eric. It's real. Time is real. And that's where I like telling people, let's just get that around our heads. And then I like to understand form and formula, and that's your family, occupation, recreation, and then your money. But money's just a tool. I wrote a book about it, A Blueprint and Financial Guide for the Working Class American. Thank you again.
Good. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff, Ron. I really appreciate all the advice today. That's a wrap today, folks, for the TCS podcast. Until next time, keep leading, keep growing, and keep winning. We'll see you next time.